Well, our police in London are treating Monday's early morning incident where a van plowed into worshippers near a mosque as a terrorist act. 10 people were injured. Shortly after midnight, the vehicle swerved into a group of people leaving prayers at the Muslim Welfare House and the nearby Finsbury Park Mosque in North London, one of the biggest in Britain. Authorities say officers arrested the 48-year-old driver who had been detained by members of the public at the scene of the act. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Neil Bosu, the Senior National Coordinator for Counter-terrorism, says it appeared the man was the sole attacker. Bosu thanked those who detained the suspect for their restraint, calling it commendable.
And what it proves to me is that Londoners will act together to protect themselves, but they will do so in a way that doesn't feed into terrorist and extremist hands.
British Prime Minister Theresa May condemned the attack in a speech in front of her official residence and vowed that hatred and evil of this kind will never succeed.
This was an attack on Muslims near their place of worship. And like all terrorism, in whatever form, it shares the same fundamental goal. It seeks to drive us apart and to break the precious bonds of solidarity and citizenship that we share in this country.
Well, Commissioner Bosu said all of the injured were from the Muslim community. He also clarified earlier reports that a man pronounced dead at the scene was related to the attack since he was already receiving medical aid. Britain, especially London, has been on edge over several recent incidents, including last month's terror bombing in Manchester and the recent vehicle attack and stabbings near London Bridge. Well, for more insight on the challenges of fighting terrorism, I'm joined by Alberto Fernandez, a counter-terrorism expert and former coordinator for strategic counter-terrorism at the U.S. State Department. He has also been U.S. ambassador to Equatorial Guinea and chief of mission in Sudan. Ambassador Fernandez, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Now, we mentioned challenges of fighting the new methods being employed. We have seen such a shift. Now, what do you make of this? Use of vehicles, use of knives on the streets?
Well, it's a way for jihadist groups to make it easier to commit violence. The old pattern of a plot involving explosives and involving large groups of people is more complicated. The simpler you can make it, the easier it becomes for people to carry things out.
So now, how do authorities go about combating these new methods? Because who can stop a person from driving around? Who can stop a person from, having a knife?
Well, of course, it varies from place to place. What strategies you would use in Nigeria are going to be different than strategies you would use in the UK or the United States. But first of all, of course, the first line of defense is always law enforcement, national security, the power of the state to punish, the power of the state to investigate and do that. But beyond that, you have the ideology. And there you have to do two things. You have to do the negative and the positive. You have to find ways to weaken their ideology, to discredit it, to subvert it, to subvert the building blocks of it. And then you have to have something which draws people together, a narrative which is about community, a narrative which is about solidarity and unity and bringing diverse people and diverse communities together.
So what you're saying here is not about fighting it. It's not about using weapons or using some kind of war strategy. It's about ideology and kind of psychology here.
Well, it's both. You have to fight, you have to kill the adversary, you have to prevent terrorist attacks from happening. But of course, you can't kill your way out of this problem because it's also an ideological problem. So it means you have to fight the ideological battle, the media battle, as well as the one of law enforcement and national security.
You know, this is sometimes very sensitive when you talk about Muslims largely being involved in terrorism. And we know most of those who have been killed by terrorists are actually Muslims in Muslim countries.
Yes.
But at the same time, how do you explain that a great number of those who participate happen to be, professing Islam?
Well, you have a historical reality, which is a revolutionary ideological movement, which is Salafi jihadism, which grows out of Islam, takes elements from Islam and politicizes it, weaponizes it, principally, as you said, against other Muslims and non-Muslims. So I think the mistake people have is people have these exaggerations, right? These extremes. This is either all about Islam or this is nothing about Islam. What it actually is, it's about a political movement which uses something very powerful, which is religion as a clothing, as rocket fuel to jet power that ideology that they have.
Is there anything that parents, say parents of young people who are likely to be lured into this, kind of ideology, is there anything they could do?
Well, I think there's a lot they could do. First of all, I think that the ideology preys on a superficial and an ignorant understanding of religion and a superficial and ignorant understanding of the world that you live in. So having your kids being educated about their own religion, having kids being educated on the own country that they're in is really important. The extremists prey on stupidity. They prey on alienation and questions of identity. So you have to ask yourself, what does it mean to be a young Muslim growing up in the West? To whom are they loyal to? To whom do they identify with? So it's a question of kind of countering the ability of the adversary they have to seize upon alienated, dumb, angry young people.
Yeah. Now, how about the case like what we saw in London? This is a non-Muslim,
yes.
In fact, attacked mostly Muslims.
Yes.
And also think about the US, we've had attacks that have not been perpetrated by Muslims.
Yes.
What is that? Isn't it terrorism?
Well, it's a similar thing. The Islamist jihadist ideology, which I'm talking about, is a product of modernism. So you have pathologies of the far right and the far left, which are exactly the same. What happened in London today, this attacker that attacked people coming out of a mosque? This was generated by bigotry. It was generated by hatred of the other, different than me, and a sense of punishing individuals for the perceived crimes of everybody, right? Because of Manchester or London, I'm going to hurt people coming out of a mosque because they are responsible. This is exactly the worldview that the jihadists use for 9/11, for 7/7, or for whatever. So it's always about bigotry, about my view of the other, and about blaming a community for a perceived action committed by supposedly someone part of that community.
In about 10 seconds, do you see as defeating this in the very near future?
I think it's going to be hard. I think the key is to continue to work steadily, not going to extremes, not losing focus.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Fernandez, we do appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Ambassador Fernandez is a former coordinator for strategic counterterrorism at the U.S. State Department. And in July, he'll become the new president of the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, which is a sister network of the Voice of America.